Minister, let's talk about that handover. Of course, you've worked very closely with Mr. Hanekom when you were together in science and technology. Obviously, it's going to be a smooth handover.
I certainly hope so. We've been very fortunate that we worked exceptionally well together. I was very, very lucky to have such an excellent colleague. We had a wonderful working relationship and worked with a department that achieved very highly. So I hope that the new Minister Hanekom will ensure that we advance, particularly the program with respect to the square kilometre array. And I hope some of the initiatives that we undertook together will be continued. But of course, every minister has new ideas. He may have not put them on the table because of me. Now is his opportunity, but I really wish him well and I thank him for the comradeship and the collegiality.
Minister, just a last question on the issue of science and technology before we move to your new portfolio. One of the issues, of course, is always resources. These innovations cost money. Research needs a lot of resources. You've had quite a substantial budget allocation. Take us through how science and technology has fared compared to, let's say, other departments in getting the slice of the public purse, and was it adequate to meet the needs of what you thought were our priorities?
I'm yet to meet a minister who will ever say their budget was adequate. But let me say we were very fortunate that we always have had the support of Treasury. We didn't reach that 1% of gross expenditure on research and development, which is a world benchmark for countries that are seeking to achieve at the highest levels of innovation and investment in research and development. At the best year, we were at around 0.97. And of course, we've been hit by the economic crisis, and we had growth in GDP and didn't have exponential growth in the budget of the department. But it has grown from year to year, not at the levels we would like to see. But as I say, we've been able to manage, and we were hoping that as the economy recovers, and I continue to believe that that must happen, we will see a ramp up, because we've got to invest in human capital. The infrastructure for science and technology requires renewal, and so we must see increased and improved investment there. We also have a number of initiatives. As the money for the satellite program comes into stream, and as we develop the satellite, we will need more investment there. So I think there are golden years ahead for science and technology.
Of course, the state has an obligation, and as you say, you are benchmarking against what is best practice, and we're not quite there yet. But I wanted to ask you, during your time as Science and Technology Minister, what was your relationship with the private sector, and particularly private sector research bodies and collaborative efforts? And what do you think is the role, the ongoing role of the private sector in boosting the science and technology sector, as it were?
I hope I won't offend any companies by mentioning one or two that I think we've had an exceptionally good relationship with. But generally across the board, I've been fortunate in that I've always had the ear of the CEOs I needed to speak to, and where I needed support, they really did give it. So to the private sector, really, we think we had a good relationship, and I hope it will again be improved upon and expanded. I do think we need to do more with industry. One of the comments from the recent Ministerial Committee report was that triple helix relationship between universities, the departments in government, and industry needs strengthening deliberately. And so there is much more that we need to do. But ESCOM, for example, I'd like to refer to, because of the work they do, both in the training of technicians, which are important to our sector, but also in terms of their support for young scientists. I think their Science Expo, the annual program, is a brilliant initiative, and it's helped to send young people to the International Expo, and we've done well there with young people from South Africa winning medals. So the investment of a big SOE like that has been extremely important to science and technology. I mentioned SASOL and the work that we've been doing with them, and of course SASOL in terms of just PhDs in a private sector company stands out as having huge numbers. So it's a massive boost for our country's competitiveness status just to look at a company like that. And I hope they will keep their research wing very strong and again support our initiatives. I'd like to refer to the issue I mentioned of growing a knowledge economy. That relies on a country as well using its own richness, its resources, to build beneficiation or value addition capacity to create new products and new industries. We've been working with one of the major mining companies, Anglo-Plat, to develop titanium powder as a future commercial product on a large scale. And it's been really their interest and investment in the initial work which has led us to the point where we're now going to build a plant where we're going to produce larger volumes of this titanium powder in order to test the commercial viability. There are many, many examples, but I mentioned those three as kind of big initiatives that stand out.
Minister, of course, we are part of the Global South. We participate in many multilateral fora, and of course, we're part of BRICS. You have mentioned particularly partnerships with BRICS countries, particularly around science and technology innovation, and of course, always the idea of focusing that within the broader context of economic growth and general prosperity for countries and their peoples. What would you say were the achievements of science and technology in strengthening ties, particularly at scientific and innovation levels, with these BRICS countries?
Well, through the IPSA, we've worked together with India, Brazil, and ourselves, South Africa. And in BRICS, our DG is part of the committee of heads of science that is charged with developing a framework for programs that we'll initiate collaboratively, because our entry to BRICS is still a new one, but we will be hosting BRICS next year. And we'll be second to China in hosting a science and technology committee meeting as well. So there have been excellent relationships, both at the bilateral, but also that multilateral collaboration. But I think most important is probably the African Union, because that's our home, as it were. And we have a science and technology, a consolidated plan of action that we are implementing as ministers of science and technology. And we've really been working very, very hard to keep each country on track in terms of the 1% of GDP invested in science, technology and innovation, and then in the focus areas identified in the science and technology action plan. So there are a range of partnerships. The biggest for us, and where South Africa has really benefited hugely, has been the relationship with the European Union, where our researchers have had the opportunity to participate in the various framework programs of the EU. Currently, the EU is shaping a new strategy, Vision 2020, and again, we hope we will benefit hugely from the programs that will be part of that new framework. But we have benefited to millions of rands of participation in a number of research initiatives, and have been able to showcase work done by our researchers and EU country researchers in the various binational meetings that we hold with the EU.
Minister, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's come to the fact that you have now been appointed as the Home Affairs Minister. You, of course, are not new to the executive. You were a previous education minister. You've served in the executive for quite a few years. What would you say, Minister, is the most important characteristic one must have to be an all-rounder, to be able to move from, portfolio to portfolio, as it were, and continue implementing that overall vision of government, obviously within the specific context of a given ministry?
I don't know. I think maybe that's a question that should be asked of someone like Trevor Manuel, or he has much more experience than me, or even President Zuma. What's he thinking when he makes some of these changes? But I think that you should be aware of the objectives of government and should seek to pursue them. I hope in work that I've done, I've tried to help achieve the objectives that our party, the African National Congress, and then our government have put forward as the policies of this country. Second is, I think you should work hard. And number three, I think you must be ready to learn. Anybody who thinks they know it all is not going to make a very good member of the executive. I think you must be ready to learn, ready to work hard, learn from other colleagues. And finally, I would say, respect the public servants as persons who have some expertise in the area in which you're deployed, and allow them to understand that you expect them to be experts and that they would bring ideas. You may debate from time to time, you may change or shift, but really for me they're a core that we need to recognize as a professional core of a system that we're trying to build.
Minister, Home Affairs has been described as one of the departments that have managed to turn the corner. They've got the systems in place, they've rooted out the problem areas, they are on course. Obviously you're going to familiarize yourself with the situation, but you have been in cabinet, you know the issues in the department. What would you say is your immediate order of business for Home Affairs, as it were? Is it to steer the ship as it is at the moment?
Well, I think I'll find that out when I get to the office. You know, one needs to have proper briefings, and I think you should always be very careful about making statements as to what should happen immediately. I recall when I was appointed Minister of Education, as I walked out of the door after swearing in, there was a journalist at the exit, and they asked me, "What's the first thing you're going to do? What do you think is imperative?" And I said, "Quality of education." I don't know where it came from, but now today I am right. That's what is the big issue. But with Home Affairs, I really think I shouldn't guess, but I would think, of course, we have made gains with respect to the security and sanctity of the ID document, and the notion that it's your right to have your identity protected, respected, and for you to be able to conduct your life efficiently. Second, that you're providing a service as the Department of Home Affairs, and it must be a quality service that is provided to every South African. And thirdly, that the mistakes and crime of the past of people not having access to their identity or documents normally available in any society, that crime must never be repeated. Children should have birth certificates, their parents should be able to have them in their hand. They must be registered appropriately. We must have proper data on our people, and none of it should be as though it's a big prize that you're getting. It should be part of our normal experience as citizens.